I am up to something fishy. A lot of something. I have a case of canned sardines in water. What am I going to do with a case of canned sardines in water? Or as some of my Marco Polo friends are referring to them as tinned fish. Well, I'm going to show you my version of a sardine fast. As usual in my videos, I will load up the description box of this video with all kinds of links for you to follow. Could be article links, it could be YouTube video links, but the description box will have lots of information that I will share with you, the things that I have learned from. The place that I first learned about a sardine fast was from Dr. Annette Bosworth, known as Dr. Boz, on YouTube. And I discovered her back in early 2019 when I was trying to understand blood sugar values. And I stumbled across her book called Any Way You Can, where she told her story about her mother's cancer and working on her mother's behalf, trying to improve her mother's health situation when her mother did not want to go through yet another round of chemotherapy. To be clear, I do not follow Dr. Boz's teaching. I appreciate some of her teaching, but I cannot go along with her keto is the way to go. Nope. I believe that we need all the macros, proteins, carbs, and fats. Our cells have all of the macros, proteins, carbs, and fats, as is shown in the image that I'm displaying on the screen, a cartoon and an actual view of a cell membrane. It has all the components of all the macros. And just like my not following all of Dr. Boz's teaching to the letter, I don't follow all the rules of a sardine fast to the letter, because a sardine fast is supposed to be just sardines. As many cans of sardines as you want to eat. I'm not going to do just sardines. My fast will be sardines and greens, protein and nutrients. And that teaching comes from Marty Kendall of optimizingnutrition.com. Marty is a diet agnostic. He once did keto, but he learned from the experience. And he has a great book called Big Fat Keto Lies. It's a tongue-in-cheek statement. He's not totally dissing keto. I will link a video of his explaining his book, Big Fat Keto Lies, and the chapters, each of the chapters in that book. I think it would be very instructive to anyone who thinks that keto is a great lifestyle diet. It's an aspect of a great lifestyle diet, but I don't think it's the whole story. Back to the topic of a sardine fast. From what I've learned on this topic of sardine fasting, most people tend to use about a dozen cans of sardines in a 3-day sardine fast, but I'm not limiting myself to just sardines. I will be fasting with sardines and greens. Before I start in on can number 1, I'm going to take my blood sugar and ketone numbers. My tools are in here. My blood glucose meter is here. It's a Dario. There will be options for blood glucose meters linked in the description box. So I'm using the Dario, and this is the blood ketone meter, a KetoCoach meter. The company is now called BioCoach. That will be linked in the description box. I'm not an affiliate for either one of these. As for the case that this is in, this is just an old Rely-On case that I started with back in 2018, and since then I switched from a Rely-On meter to the Dario glucose meter, and I repurposed the case to make all the components that I use fit in here. My ketone meter, my glucose meter, my ketone strips, a little extra cartridge that goes up here in my Dario when I need to switch out test strips, and I even have a little EKG device here, but that's a whole nother story, so don't worry about that. I'm gonna angle the camera downward so that you can see the testing, the blood ketone testing and the blood glucose testing and the insulin ratio that I figure out, which is another thing from Dr. Boz. It's helpful to me, even though I don't use her keto-only teaching. All right, I'm going to first start by testing my blood ketones. I need a test strip, and that will be inserted in the end of the KetoCoach meter. And I'm also going to be using my phone for my Dario. I'm going to pull out the Dario meter and insert it in the end of the phone, and then take off the end cap and get out test strips. I'm going to use 5 test strips because I have an unlimited test strips allowed with my $200 annual subscription. I'm sticking my side of my finger to draw up a bead of blood, and that's going to be attached to the pipette end of both of the test strips. And then I'm going to see what my ketones are. I'm 0.5 for my blood ketones, and you won't be able to see the measurements, the reading of the measurements on my phone screen because of the light, but I will put up a screenshot of all 5 glucose readings so that you can see the variance that I got with this particular testing. So 1 finger stick is working for all of these drops of blood. That's 6 drops of blood that I've pulled up, a little bead of blood from the side of my finger from 1 finger stick. Usually if you just plan it right and you keep pulling up a bead of blood, you can keep going and you don't have to keep sticking yourself for every single drop of blood. It becomes sort of muscle memory, and you learn how to be efficient after practicing a little bit. So I go through the 5 test strips, and then I will be able to see all 5 readings by touching the logbook on the screen. So those are my 5 readings. I got an 89, an 87, an 87, an 88, and a 94. And I decided that the most likely number out of those 5 readings is an 87 milligrams per deciliter glucose. In just a moment, I'm going to take both of those numbers and I'm going to do a simple calculation that will tell me what is going on with my insulin. But if one could not do that, the absolute most important thing to do is to know your glucose number. From that number, you could be able to manage your weight and wellness if you would use that number and learn from it over the course of time. I'm going to link in the description box a very important article called How to Use Your Glucose Meter as a Fuel Gauge. And that practice is what has been my overall success in being able to manage my weight and wellness after I went through menopause and I started putting on weight, called the menopause belly. Marty Kendall of OptimizingNutrition.com is the author of that article, and I found his original article back in 2018, and I took it to heart and I began learning from it. I applied that learning to my Trim Healthy Mama lifestyle diet that I'd been doing since 2013. But as I struggled with menopausal weight gain, I was trying to figure out what's the answer here, because something's not working anymore. And instead of eating every 2 to 3 hours, as is suggested by Trim Healthy Mama, I began using my glucose number as my fueling guide, as my timing. And so that did change the way I eat, but it also opened up a whole new enjoyment of not having to prepare food every 3 to 4 hours, or not having to take food with me everywhere I went, so that I could stick to that 3 to 4 hour eating schedule, and also not having to eat smaller meals. Instead, I began eating much larger meals, and I was doing it for the most part. The past 4+ years, I was eating 1 meal a day, but I am now trying to eat 2 meals a day, because from just continuing to learn from Marty Kendall and learning about the importance of protein and learning about the importance of nutrients, not necessarily focusing on fats or carbs, whether I use either one of those, but that I get in protein and nutrients. I know now I need to try to eat 2 meals a day in order to get in enough protein and enough nutrients. And then once I'm meeting those needs, I can decide whether I'm going to use one of the 2 fueling sources of fats or carbohydrates. And that's where Trim Healthy Mama still serves me really well, because their recipes, their food items are fuel separated, focusing on fats for the S meals that are low carb meals, or focusing on using the energy fuel source of carbs, which are the E meals, the low fat meals. So between the Trim Healthy Mama education that I've had since 2013, and then adding in Marty Kendall's education of OptimizingNutrition.com, and learning from Dr. Boz, and learning from the Glucose Goddess, and learning from the Mastering Diabetes guys, learning from lots of places, I've put all of that together and come up with what works for me and helps me have a great food life, an enjoyable food life. And this sardine challenge, doing a few days of sardine fasting while focusing still on nutrients at the same time, that's where the greens comes in. Sardines and greens. It's because of Marty Kendall and what I've learned from him that I don't want to do just sardines. I want to do sardines and greens. And that's what's happening for me the next 3 days that I'll be sharing with you. All right, let's figure out the insulin ratio. I'm going to take the numbers from my readings, my glucose readings, and I'm going to go to an app on my phone for the calculator. I've got a calculator app here to click on. And I'm going to type in the 87, and I'm going to divide it by the 0.5 and get a number, 174. So I'm putting up on the screen a chart from Dr. Boz, so back to Dr. Boz on this, that shows that a glucose of 80 or below is considered, she says that's guaranteed weight loss. What's not shown on that chart is she also teaches that anything 200 and above is considered high insulin. I'm going to put up another chart or another picture from Marty Kendall that talks about insulin, not so much in terms of fat storage, but holding back our ability to access our fat. I have been fascinated the last number of years to be learning about insulin and its opposite hormone of glucagon, to learn that insulin, while most people think of it as a fat storage hormone, it is trying to put away glucose and help our glucose not to be too high in our bloodstream. But it's also holding back our fat storage until our glucose in our bloodstream lowers. I'm putting up an image of sort of the homeostasis picture between the pancreas and the liver and glucagon and insulin, and our body is constantly trying to help us maintain a healthy glucose level in our bloodstream, because ideally we would not have more than about 1 teaspoon of sugar, glucose, in circulation in our bloodstream. And when we get out of those parameters of about that 1 teaspoon, our body is working hard to get us back to that level. I will link an article that talks about that 1 teaspoon of blood sugar. I'm putting up an image of one of Marty's best articles that shows, it's an illustration that we cannot access our stored body fat until we burn through our fuel in a certain oxidative priority, glucose being the first fuel that we have to let burn down to a certain level before we can begin working downstream to get to using our stored body fat. So I'm going to link that article, as well as you can see the image of his fuel tank images, but his article for that, the link for that article will be in the description box. Knowing your glucose number, working with it alone is enough to manage your weight and wellness. But I didn't know that when I started using Dr. Boz's ratio and tracking my insulin as well. And that's kind of the monkey that I have on my back. I don't want to give up that information. And so I keep taking that blood ketone number, not trying to increase my ketone number by putting something in exogenously. Like, I don't increase my fats to try to elevate my ketone number. I don't use exogenous ketones that you can add to your drinks or whatever. I don't do that. I'm not trying to artificially elevate my ketone number. I'm only tracking the ketones that my body is making on its own, the endogenous ketone numbers. I will connect you to a link to the Dr. Boz ratio, calculating how she calculates that out, where she got that information from. It's from Dr. Thomas Seyfried is her main source. You can find him on lots of different YouTube videos talking about cancer as a metabolic disease, and he talks about the GKI ratio. Well, the GKI ratio is the same information as the Dr. Boz ratio, just done mathematically different. And Dr. Boz has simplified the GKI ratio down to taking milligrams of glucose, milligrams per deciliter, divided by millimole per liter of ketones, and she uses those two numbers to calculate out her ratio, targeting 200 and below, or 80 or 40 or 20. So her video, her 14-minute video that I'm showing you an image of, will be linked in the description box so you can learn that for yourself if you want. But you don't have to go that far. Glucose alone will be enough. If you go to optimizingnutrition.com, to Marty Kendall's blog post, to his website, or you look for his How to Use a Glucose Meter as Your Fuel Gauge article that I linked in the description box, that alone will be enough. A simple glucose meter alone will be enough. I'm just letting you know all the things that I do so that I'm being upfront and open and not hiding anything, because I do both glucose and ketone measurements. Now for the actual getting to the sardines part. I'm going to point the camera down so you can see the opening of the cans of sardines. I'm going to start with 2 cans for this first meal. All right, I have these 2 cans of sardines. I bought a case from Walmart. They were $1.07 a can. And I'm going to just open them up so you can see what they're like. Try not to make a mess here. Just dump that in the sink. And these are sardines in water. I'm going to just pour off the water and put the can into a bowl. And that can had 4 sardines in it. Each can is considered a single serving, but I'm going to have 2 cans at the very least in this first meal, because each can has 16 grams of protein, and I want to get above 30 or above grams of protein per each time I eat. All right, so I think that had an extra when they were able to fit it in. Those are my sardines, skin and bone and all. Now, why sardines? Because I'll put up an image on the screen for you to see. I'm going to rinse my fingers. Sardines with the bone and skin are very high in calcium and extremely high in omega-3s, a very healthy brain fat that we need, high in CoQ10, and a good source of minerals. And Dr. Boz's video will explain that mercury isn't really an issue. So Dr. Boz's 6-minute video that I've linked in the description box will give you a good explanation of why sardines. But I'm putting up an image that will also be a good visual for those that learn visually. The importance of the big deal about eating canned sardines is the high omega-3 value that they offer us. I was curious about sardines being farmed versus wild caught, so I did a little research, and it wasn't hard to find that sardines are all wild caught. They're little tiny fishes that are not economical to farm. So seeing the label wild caught on the can, it's just a marketing thing. So, what to do with these smelly little fishies? Will I enjoy them? Not so much. I will enjoy the effect of them. And I'm doing these 3 days to show you what they do to my blood sugar and ketone values, because that's part of the value of them. So with this batch, I am going to mash them up with a fork, treating them almost like canned tuna fish. So I will mash them up with a fork. I'll sprinkle some garlic powder on top and some salt to taste, and I'll just eat them with a fork or a spoon. I'm also going to have a drink that I make with greens. I have some frozen greens that I will take you to the freezer now and show you my frozen greens that I'm going to turn into a greens drink, and I'll explain that in a second. I'm in my laundry room now, and this is our upright freezer. And down here on the door, I have a bag of arugula that I got from Trader Joe's, and I didn't get to use it before I noticed that I either needed to freeze it or it was going to go in the trash. It was going to become just slime. But now I have it sitting here in my freezer, and I can use it as the basis of my greens drink. I'm going to use this whole bag of arugula, and I'm going to blend it up in my blender with some cinnamon, some sweetener, and some cayenne. And I'm going to turn it into a drink that tastes like a red hot candy. Okay, here goes my red hot greens drink. Pull out the blender. Set that up. Cut open the bag. And dump the whole thing in. Okay. I need some cinnamon. So I'm just gonna shake some out into the lid, and I would say that that's about a tablespoon. I think so. And then that goes back. And cayenne. I'm going to open my bottle of cayenne here. And I'm also going to just shake out some of that. And I would say that's probably around a teaspoon. Oops, I need to put the shaker lid back on. Okay, so greens, cinnamon, cayenne, and now for the sweetener. I keep my sweetener in a little canning jar, and I'm going to use 1/8 of a teaspoon of sweetener. Let that go in. And now what I need is some water. So we just bring it over here and judge about how much I need. I want to fill up about a 32-ounce jar, and I think that will do it. What is that? Can't read it. It says I put in 2 cups, looks like. Back to the blender. Sit down, put the lid on, and let's turn on the blend. jar until you taste. I'm going to open up my jars. Get a jar out. Straws, lids down here. So I am going to open this up and see how it tastes. I think it needs a little more cinnamon. Okay. So back to the cinnamon. I put in probably another teaspoon. And let's blend one more time. Oops. Do it. Taste again. Do not commit to the jar until it's right. Okay, that pleases me more. And so now let's see how close I came to getting the measurement right. This is I think a 28-ounce jar. Oh wow. I'm so pleased with myself. All right. There is my greens drink. I'll put the lid on. I'm going to enjoy this, unlike the sardines. Here is my first meal of the day. I took the sardines and I mashed them up. I seasoned them and I served it up with my greens drink. I had to eat in Steve's office because the house was noisy with some activity, and so this was taken at his desk. Well, I'm getting hungry again, so that means it's time to test again. I'll point the camera downward and let you see the testing. The testing is the same every time. Pull out a ketone strip for testing the blood ketones. Insert that into the BioCoach. Get out the meter from the Dario case. Put that into the end of the phone and pull out the testing strips. And in my case, I use 5 because of my unlimited test strip subscription. And I take a finger stick off the side of my finger and draw up a bead of blood. And I should be able to get through all of the testing with just that one finger stick. And I will see what my ketones are. I got a 0.8 that time. So my ketones have gone up from 0.5 to 0.8. And now I'll move on with the rest of the blood glucose test strips. I'll put up the screen so you can see what I got for all 5 testings. But I got an 88, an 82, an 85, and there'll be an 84 and an 89. And out of those, I am going to say that the most likely number is an 85. And then, after I have all the numbers, I will calculate out the insulin ratio, taking glucose milligrams per deciliter divided by ketones millimoles per liter, and come up with my insulin ratio. And in my case, it will be 85 divided by 0.8 gives me an insulin ratio of 106. And so that is the testing process, and just put everything back where it belongs, the meter back in the Dario case, and close the kit up, and take a screenshot of all of the 5 numbers so that I could share those with you. And that is the end of the testing process. And now I'll calculate my insulin ratio. So I'm going to take the 85 and go to the calculator app, and I'm going to go 85 divided by the 0.8 equals 106.25. So my insulin ratio has come down from 174 to 106, and that's getting closer to the 80 of guaranteed weight loss. So because I am using both of my numbers, glucose, milligrams per deciliter, divided by ketones, millimoles per liter, I know that my insulin ratio from the first time I was ready to eat was at 174, and it has come down now to the second time when I'm hungry and ready to eat. It has come down to 106. Now, it still would have looked okay if I were going only by my glucose, because earlier in the day I had a glucose of, I was going by 80, was it 88? Let me look. 87. So earlier in the day, my glucose was at 87, and now I'm saying that it is at 88, which is good because that means that if I had an elevation in glucose, it came back down to baseline, and that's a healthy thing to do before you eat again. Now, my personal hunger trigger, that's a whole different topic. For data-driven-fasting.com information, I'm not observing my personal hunger trigger right now. I'm just going on the data that I'm collecting for a Sardine and Greens fast. But you will be able to find information on personal hunger trigger if you chase down the links that I've given you for Marty Kendall's optimizingnutrition.com. And data-driven fasting is part of optimizingnutrition.com, as are data-driven macros and data-driven micros. Those are just more rabbit trails for you to follow. So now I will have my second meal of the day, 2 more cans of sardines, another 32 grams of protein, and my greens drink, and that's all I will have consumed today, but I will have at least gotten in a good percentage of protein, and I will have gotten my nutrients in through greens. This image shows the data for the food I consumed today. I had 2 of my sardines and greens meals. Each meal consisted of 2 cans of sardines and 1 of my red hot greens drinks. Each of my greens drinks was made with a 5-ounce bag of greens that came in our weekly farm box order. One of the drinks was made with a bag of arugula, and the other drink was made with a bag of spinach. And for each drink, to turn it into one of my red hot drinks, I added a tablespoon of Ceylon cinnamon, a teaspoon of cayenne, and a 1/4 teaspoon of stevia. Now, although I normally loathe tracking and recording food, I did it today because one of my sisters asked me if there were any way that my idea of fasting with sardines and greens would be able to fit macro parameters of Walter Longo's fasting mimicking diet, which is something that refers to a plan he created as a 5-day prep for patients going into chemotherapy treatments. He designed a packaged kit called Prolon, which has now become popular with mainstream dieters, and it can be purchased for $150. I was curious about Prolong, but I was unwilling to spend that kind of money on packaged powdered food.
not to mention that packaged powder food seems extremely unappealing to me. Instead of the Prolong kit, I experimented with a do-it-yourself fasting mimicking diet of raw veggies and nuts. I did that back in February of this year as part of participating in a free online 5-day coaching event that I'd seen advertised on Facebook. During that 5 days, I was shocked to observe the positive shift in my glucose and ketones and the insulin ratio that I obtained. While that do-it-yourself fasting mimicking diet was not a true fast, which abstains from consuming any form of nourishment, something fascinating happened, even though I was consuming raw foods and nuts calculated to fit into the fasting mimicking diet macros. It was an eye-opening experience watching my blood glucose and ketones shift into ratios that indicated autophagy, according to the glucose ketone index, or in my case, using the calculation of the Dr. Boz ratio.
Day 2 of the 3-day Sardines and Greens fast. I woke up this morning feeling just a little bit hungry, so I knew that that was a good sign that I hadn't overeaten yesterday. Usually when I eat too much the day before, then there's no sign of hunger when I wake up in the morning. And it takes a while for the hunger to come to me. But today I had the affirmation of just a touch, an awareness that, yeah, I could go ahead and eat. But ideally, I like to eat between 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock. So now it's a little bit after 10, and I have definite strong hunger. Okay, time to eat. I have my 2 cans of sardines, but this time, instead of just eating them out of the can, mashed with salt and garlic powder, I am going to cook these in the air fryer and put a little crisp on them. So here's my air fryer, and I just need one of the trays. I have my sink cleaned out, and I'm going to set it down in the sink because that contains the mess. So I'll open the can right here and put the fish onto the tray. Let's chuck that in the trash. Okay, and then I will spread them out a little bit. And let's see. It's nice because I can just rinse my fingers here. Give them a good dusting of garlic powder. And some salt. Okay, and now they're going in the air fryer. And close that up and turn it on for the 15 minutes. And just push start, and while that's going, back to the freezer. I have a farm box delivery that comes every week, and in that farm box, spilling some leaves here, frozen leaves. I pick those up, a couple little flakes. In the farm box, I have usually a couple bags of spinach. They're 5 ounces each, and if I don't get to them, they go in the freezer. I don't want to waste them. And now I have these to use as my red hot greens drink. To the blender. Okay, we're gonna just dump these in here and do the same thing we did yesterday. I'm feeling like having the red hot greens drink. I could change it up and do it a different way, but this suits me again today. So there's another good, at least a tablespoon of cinnamon. You want to use a, you don't want the cassia cinnamon. You want to be using the Ceylon cinnamon, and that's what this is. I just use this Dan & Witt's container from Norwich, Vermont, and keep refilling it, but that's what's in here. And then I'll put up a graphic about the difference in the two cinnamons. They look different and they taste different. The cassia is the least expensive one, that's kind of the run-of-the-mill cinnamon that you buy in the grocery store, and it's good for baking because it's more pungent. Okay, and then the Ceylon is milder, softer tasting. Then I want about a teaspoon of cayenne. Oops. Get the shaker lid back on here. Okay. And I need some sweetening. Use stevia. And a teaspoon. Alright, those are the ingredients. Now for the water. Okay. Put in about 2 cups or so. That ought to do it. Let's see, did I do it? I think so. A little less. Add a little more. Okay. That's the water. Get back to the blender here. While it blends, I'll put up that graphic about the difference between cassia and Ceylon cinnamon. Taste it before I commit it to the jar. That's good. Perfect. Okay, get a jar. I want this one. I didn't have quite as much water this time. Okay. I could add some ice, but it's nice and icy because the spinach was frozen. And there is my red hot cinnamon drink. And the little fishies are all cooked, ready. Crisped up a little bit. My food is ready, so let's test. All right, we're going to do the same thing. Pull out the kit and get ready to test. I need the ketone blood test strip, so I'll open the envelope for that, and that goes in the Keto Coach. And again, that company is now called BioCoach. And I'm going to pull up my Dario app and get out the meter and put it in the end of the phone. That meter feels like a little Lego piece to me. And then open the end cap of the case, the Dario case, so I can get out my test strips. Set those out. Stick one in. And the next thing is to do the finger stick on the side of my finger. That didn't quite work, so I just did it again. Give it another pop. Pull up a bead of blood and touch the bead of blood to the pipette end of both test strips. And this time on the ketones,
I had a 0.9. And so my first glucose reading was an 88. And they all stayed pretty close in range. As a matter of fact, the second glucose reading also was an 88. But I just kept using test strips because that's what I do. So one after another. At the end, I got a little surprise when the fifth test strip was a 78. So I ended up using a 6 test strip because I was like, oh, what if I get another 78 or even lower? I want to factor that in compared to all the other numbers. So after I've got all the stuff put away, I will show you all the numbers together so you can see how I decide which of the glucose values I think is the most realistic from the 6 that I ended up taking. I used to just take 3 or 2 or 3, and if the digits were within 3 points of each other, 3 number values, then I would decide between those. But somewhere along the line, I started using 5 test strips. Okay, so I take a screenshot, and then I can show you what all those numbers look like. So I have a 91, a 78, an 87, 84, and 2 88s. I am going to now do the insulin ratio math by dividing the 88 by the 0.9, and I'll have an insulin ratio of 98. So you have a reference to make sense of the numbers, what they mean. I will put up Dr. Boz's chart again, and you can see that in the middle chart are her ratio numbers, and then on the far right side of the chart are the GKI numbers, the glucose to ketone index. So her numbers just make more sense in my brain to take the way my meter reads milligrams for my glucose, and then my ketone meters naturally reads in millimoles. So the two numbers work really well together, and it's simple for me to keep in mind that I want my insulin ratio to not be above 200 because that's high insulin, but then I have those other target numbers of 80, 40, and 20. And I don't shoot for 40 and 20. I sometimes go for the 80, but being able to just maintain my weight is something that is making me happy. My meal is ready for me. Well, I'm hungry, so that means it's time to test and then go ahead and eat. I'll point the camera downwards so you can see my numbers as I see them. You'll learn what my numbers are when I learn what my numbers are. Okay, so open the kit, get out a ketone strip and put that in the BioCoach, and get out the meter from the Dario case, put that in the end of the phone, and get out some test strips. So I'm going to need to put a new cartridge in. So pull that out. Okay, the old cartridge just gets pulled out by the tab, and the new cartridge that has 25 test strips in it gets popped in its place. And there's 3, 4, 5 test strips here. That's what I want, 5. Okay, close that up, and I need to touch my Dario app and get it open. Insert a new test strip. Pull it back the cocking device and do the side of my finger. Draw up a bead of blood. Touch that to the pipette end of the test strips, and drop another bead so that
it's ready. Ketones, 1.2. That is beautiful. Okay, glucose is 81 on that one. And let's see here. A couple more numbers so that I can compare. 82. Well, that's nice and close. If this third one is as nicely, tightly in the same parameters, I will go ahead and just stop with the test strips. 80. So I had, did I have 80, 81, 82? Let me look at the logbook. Yep. Okay, I'm just going to stop then. And I'll put that away, and these strips that I didn't use can go back in the chamber. Okay, put the lid on, pull out the meter, put that away, and now to calculate the insulin ratio. So get my calculator going here. So I had an 80, 81, 82. Let's go with the 81 since it's the middle number. 81 divided by 1.2, insulin ratio of 67.5. We're going to bounce it up to 68. And then up on the screen, I will put the chart again so that you can see the insulin ratio values and kind of make heads or tails of what I just showed you for my numbers. But everything's looking good. So as you can see on the Dr. Boz chart that shows both the insulin, her insulin ratio, as well as the more scientific standard ratio of GKI, which stands for glucose ketone index, I am in weight loss mode. I've gone below the ratio of 80 and I'm down to a ratio of 68. I am hungry, and I'm going to put together, I think tonight I'm going to have 2 cans of sardines and a can of kippers. And instead of doing that with a red hot drink, I'm going to change it up, and I'm going to do it with something called Nuchi Greens. And I will put information about Nuchi Greens in the description box, but basically it's just taking some greens and very lightly drizzling them with some sort of a healthy fat. I'm going to use olive oil, and massaging that around, and then using nutritional yeast, which will up my B vitamins to use that. It will also give it a more interesting flavor. I'm switching out flavors from the Red Hot to the Nuchi Greens. And I'm giving myself something more to chew than just eating the 2 cans of sardines. Because chewing is an important part of weight loss and food satisfaction. I'll put up a couple links about studies that talk about the effect of chewing in our brain and weight loss and thermogenesis. So that will be in the description box. But, and in addition to making the Nuchi Greens according to the actual recipe that was shared, I will drizzle some apple cider vinegar on it and add that tang to it. So, of course, with all things, I'm messing with the original recipe, but it's okay. That's how I do it. These are the things that are going to make up my meal. I have olive oil and apple cider vinegar and nutritional yeast and salt and a bag of arugula and 2 cans of sardines and 1 can of smoked herring. It's called, I got this from Trader Joe's, Kipper Fillets Wild-Caught Smoked Herring. I am going to rinse off those fish, and then the sardines are canned in water. So I will show you the making of the Nuchi Greens. To make the Nuchi Greens, you just need some salad greens. And this is 5 ounces of arugula. And I am going to lightly drizzle that with some olive oil. Just a little tiny bit. And then I am going to massage that with my hands just to get it all kind of mixed together. Try to coat the greens a little bit with the olive oil. I have another bag of arugula in the fridge, so I'm going to get that and add that to that because this doesn't seem like quite enough for me. I want more. Okay, I have a second bag, and I think I'll use part of it, not the whole thing. Let's see, can I get out enough? That's good. Okay, and then just massage this around. Basically, I want the olive oil to cling to it a little bit, and then I think what I'm going to do next is just a tiny bit of apple cider vinegar. Spread that around. That's probably a tablespoon for a little bit of tang. And then I am going to want to use nutritional yeast. That's where this salad gets its name from, is the nutritional yeast. Another name for nutritional yeast is nooch, and so this is called Noochie Greens. And then you just try to massage that around and get the nutritional yeast to stick to it. When you're buying nutritional yeast, you want to look for the kind that says that it has folate, not folic acid, as one of the ingredients. Folate, that is the natural form. You want to eat the 8. And this came from Walmart, and I was really surprised to find that it was the kind with folate in it. There's the word right there. I know you can't see it, but my thumb is marking it. And another giveaway for the nutritional yeast to know that you've got the one with folate instead of folic acid is the color of it. It needs to be more of a tan, brownish color, not a bright yellow. If it's bright yellow, then you're being sold the folic acid version. So this now has a pretty good coating. I want to do some more. I'm just, eyeballing it, doing it by sight. And then the other thing I want to do is put some salt on it. And now I'm going to put it in a serving bowl, and I'll drain both cans of these sardines and put those on top, and I will drain and rinse off these kipper fillet smoked herring. I do not want canola oil. Okay, so I'm going to rinse off my hands. Okay, I will open the sardines. There's one can. I'll drain that off in a minute. And 2 cans. And then I'll open these kipper fillets, smoked herring. These are going to be much larger. Get the lid off without splashing myself all over the place. Come on, come on. A little bit more. There we go. Okay. So these I will drain off and rinse because I don't want the canola oil. These I'm just going to drain, and then I'll put everything on top of the salad and serve myself in a second. I made a last-minute decision that I am going to dress this up with some capers. And I'll put a graphic up on the screen to show you why. You may not be able to read the graphic, but capers are high in flavonoid compounds, rutin and quercetin. Quercetin has anti-carcinogenic and anti-inflammatory properties. Rutin strengthens capillaries and helps smooth muscle circulation of blood in very small vessels. It also can reduce the LDL cholesterol levels in the blood. So I am going to sprinkle some capers on top and just give this a little more interesting aspect. And now I'm going to serve myself. Here is my meal, and I am ready to sit down and enjoy this meal. Actually, I will enjoy it because of the nutri-greens and the capers and just the change in pace from the last 3 meals I've had, the 2 fish meals yesterday and 1 this morning. It is day 3 of my sardines and greens experiment, and I'm getting hungry, so it is time to put together my meal and to test and see what my blood glucose is and what my blood ketones are so that I can figure out where my insulin ratio is. When I started this 3-day experiment on myself, I purchased a case of sardines in water from Walmart, and each can was $1.07. So I had 12 cans, that's a case of sardines, and each day, yesterday and the day before, I ate 4 cans. So two cans with my first meal and 2 cans with my second meal. Last night, with my second meal, I also added in a can of kippers, smoked herring, which confused me. Why was it called kippers? And then it said smoked herring. So I looked that up, and I now know that a kipper is a whole herring, and then it can be smoked, and so that's why it was called a kipper. I looked up a couple different resources. One says, what are kippers? A kipper is a fat herring that has been salted or brined and then cold smoked. A kipper is a fat herring. Okay, and then the other answer is, or the question, what is the difference between a kipper and a smoked herring? A kipper is a whole herring that has been sliced in half, pickled, brined, and then smoked. Pickled or brined, salted, pickled or brined, and smoked. So a kipper is a herring. A herring is a kipper. Anyway, I felt the need for more than just the 2 cans of sardines for my dinner last night. So, these kind of represent each a meal. And today I might do the same, but I think, and I have some other cans of tinned fish that I can add in that I wanted to talk about. So you don't have to stick to just sardines in a sardines fast or my sardines and greens thing. You don't have to do any of it, but you have options. And all of these things, these other versions of tinned fish, do have omega-3 fats. As a matter of fact, I learned that mackerel, this is mackerel in olive oil, which I will drain and rinse off the olive oil, but mackerel is higher in omega-3s than sardines. So, but maybe the sardine fast came about because sardines are one of the cheapest or least expensive tinned fishes. So I have this mackerel that I could use in one of my 2 meals. I have the lightly smoked mussels that I could use, and I also have a can of whole oysters. Now, I found an interesting graphic on oysters that is running across the screen now, and if I eat these, I have to dress them up with something like Frank's Red Hot sauce, but I've done that a number of times with canned whole oysters. And oysters have their own health benefit, even though they're not terribly high in omega-3s. So I'll be getting plenty of omega-3s with these 2 cans, and then I can add in more omega-3s, but other health benefits by adding in the oysters. The other benefit is this is another 14 grams of protein. At the very least, when I'm having my meal, I want to have 2 cans of sardines because I want to get above, I want to reach or go above that 30 grams of protein per meal threshold that I have in my mind. And why I have that in my mind is because of some of the protein podcasts that I've listened to. I wish I could remember which ones to point you to directly. I think it is Lehman that is mentor to Gabrielle Lyon. He's done some podcasts. I will look up his name just a second. Okay, his name is Dr. Don Lehman, and he is the mentor to Gabrielle Lyon that also promotes protein. And I often share her 14-minute video clip, which is in the description box of this video. But he's her mentor teacher, so I feel like she's a great resource, but he's the expertise in it, and he's all over the YouTube. So I'm pretty sure that I heard about the 30 grams or above threshold that it's important to get per meal from the podcast that he did with Dr. Peter Attia, episode 224 of Dr. Attia's podcast. So, and the topic is dietary protein, amount needed, ideal timing, and more. And it's a long one. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes. But anyway, I think it's that podcast or YouTube video that gave me the idea that every time I eat, I want to get 30 grams or above of protein. And so each of these cans has 16 grams of protein, so that gives me 32. But when I can boost it up by another 14 grams of protein. And yes, more protein is better in my not so humble opinion. So the canned smoked herring kippers thing that I added in last night to my gnocchi salad greens bowl with the fish on top, that added another 26 grams of protein. So that was a really nice amount of protein, and I had no hunger after eating that, and I slept well through the night, and I've lasted well into this morning. So I'm pretty sure I'm just going to go ahead and take the easy route for eating and have these 2 cans not in the air fryer, not cooked, just opened, drained, along with the oysters. And I think I'm going to do Frank's Red Hot sauce on them. And then I don't feel like having a salad now. I got my chewing out of my system last night with the big salad that I had. I'm feeling chocolatey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my greens and I'm going to turn it into a chocolate drink. I'm going to turn it into a Mexican chocolate drink with cayenne and chocolate, make it spicy and sweet and chocolatey. And that's the way I'm going to go for my first meal of the day. I'll show that to you when I have it prepared. However, I think it would be useful if I also show you my making the different version of the greens drink so that you can see that you can take it from one thing to another thing and how flexible it is. So we'll start by going to my freezer to look for some frozen greens. Okay, we're at the freezer, and I'll open this up to show you. And this is a bag of frozen parsley. I like to keep fresh parsley on hand, but when I know it's going to go bad, it goes in the freezer. I don't want to waste it. I got all kinds of greens chucked in here in various spots. There's some on the door here. There's some asparagus ends, but I don't want to add asparagus ends into my green drink. I'm going to just keep it greens. Now the nice thing about using parsley is that it's such a nutritional powerhouse. I consider it even more nutritionally packed than just using one of those 5-ounce bags of spinach, which I still have some of those frozen in there. But I'm going to use the parsley this time. Okay, it's the same drill. Just put the greens in here. You know what? I'm realizing this isn't as much parsley as I want to get into me. So I'm going to step back to the freezer again in just a second and get some more. Or maybe I'll do a combo of parsley and spinach. Maybe that would be the best thing. You know, it's always good to have plenty of nutrients from different sources too. So, will I do that? I think so. Okay. No, I just remembered I have the arugula that I started to use some of last night for the salad, and I didn't use all of it, so I'll finish that up. This is going to be a nutritional powerhouse because arugula is wonderful and parsley is wonderful. So I'll finish this bag of arugula. And the nice thing about arugula, it's a little peppery, and I want sort of a peppery drink, a hot drink. Okay, so there's that. And I need to add the water. You've seen that before, so I'll spare you that part. Okay, I got the water and the greens in here, and the next thing is, I said I was gonna add chocolate, and I was gonna add cayenne to have like a Mexican hot chocolate drink, or a cold Mexican hot chocolate, whatever. But I know that it has cinnamon in it, so then I remembered, okay, start from where I was, that I've shown you before, the red hot greens. So let's go back to that idea and do some cinnamon. And since I got out a measuring spoon to get out some of my chocolate, not that I measure it precisely, but I thought I would use the measuring spoon for some odd reason. I will measure this time how much cinnamon I put in here. I'll start by doing it in the cap like I normally do and kind of eyeballing it. And that felt like the right amount. So now let's measure it to show whether I'm there or not. Okay, so it's a little more than a tablespoon of cinnamon. Remember, Ceylon, not cassia cinnamon. Okay, so about a tablespoon and a half of cinnamon. Now you know that information. I know I drive some of my friends crazy. They want to know, what are the measurements? And I don't measure a whole lot. I'm going to do a couple dashes of salt because when you're using chocolate, a nice offset to it is salt. So 3 dashes of salt. And then the cayenne. And I will, again, measure so you can know about what amount of cayenne I'm suggesting. Okay, I think that's about the amount. And I'd say that is definitely a generous teaspoon there. Okay, so that itself is the Red Hot's greens drink. Now I'm taking it to chocolate territory. I normally buy this big bag from Amazon, Millard's organic cacao powder. And then what I do is from the big bag, I transfer it. I wrap it so I can see what that bag is. Roll it up that way. so I can see the bag. And this just stays in my pantry as a refill source. But what I do, because it would be a pain to measure out of this bag all the time, I put a portion of that bag into an old Hershey's container. And so this isn't Hershey's, it's the organic cacao. And I think it's going to take a good 2 tablespoons of chocolate to give me that chocolatey taste. Oh, and I realized I didn't put in my stevia. So, get out my stevia container. And because it's got the bitterness of the chocolate, I'm actually going to this time, instead of just using 1/8 of a teaspoon of stevia, I'm going to double that and use, that's now 1/4 of a teaspoon of stevia powder. And then I will blend and taste. So I'm not going to make you sit through the blending part. Time to taste. Okay. I'm thinking another tablespoon of cocoa would be appropriate. Now I have to remember not to start this thing up with that straw in there, but I want to not set it down and make a mess, so I'm going to get out my jar. Okay. Straw goes in the jar. The next taste testing. And I need another tablespoon of cocoa. Do I need more sweetener? We'll see. Testing will tell. All right, I'll blend again. Time to taste again. Yeah, take the cap off. Then this. Still made a mess. Okay, that's better. Definitely more chocolate coming through. The greens are strong, so you need something strong to overpower them. Yes, that's distinctly chocolate tasting now with 3 tablespoons. But would it be even more chocolate tasting? Yes, it would, with 4 tablespoons. Okay. Talk about antioxidants, boy. Chocolate, all this cocoa, cacao, whatever. One more blending time. Okay, one more taste test. Okay, no more greens taste to me. Not really. It's very faintly in the background. It's nice, it's spicy hot, and it's sweet. I don't want any more sweetener to it. And so this is good right here. But I do want you to know, you could doctor it up even more if you wanted. You could add more protein if you wanted. You could put in, you could blend in a scoop of collagen. You could blend in mushroom powders. Well, forget it. I keep mushroom powders back there, so that's another option. But I'm just going to leave it the way it is right now and not try to complicate your brain. So now I'm going to serve up my meal and make it attractive for myself, and then I'll show it to you. Here is my meal that I'm serving to myself and trying to make it as appealing as possible, including the atmosphere of eating by candlelight. It may seem strange that my food is on half my plate, but I wanted to be able to see the 4 geese because it reminds me of my friends, the gaggle. And so I have piled the oysters on top of the 2 cans of sardines, and I've sprinkled it generously with Frank's Red Hot sauce. And now that my meal is ready for me and I'm ready for it, let's test and see what my insulin ratio says is going on, or what my glucose says, or my ketones. What are all the things doing together? Let's, I'll point the camera down so you can see what I see. All right, we'll start by getting a ketone strip, putting that in the BioCoach meter, getting out the meter from the Dario case, putting that in. Where do we go? We need to go to the first screen. Okay, Dario, and get out these strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And put the cap back on and do the finger stick, sort of on the side of the finger, not on the sensitive tip. Apply the drop of blood to the pipette end of the test strip. Okay, and pull up another drop of blood so you don't have to stick again. That is beautiful. 1.5 ketones. Okay, and an 87 for glucose. I'll take all the numbers and compare them and do a little math and find out what my insulin is doing. That says 84. I know that my screen is bright and so you probably can't see the numbers. 83, so I'll just read them off to you and then I'll show you the whole screen together. I could have stopped with those 3 numbers, they were close enough, but I'll just use my unlimited test strips. That says 78. If I got another 78, that would be beautiful. And if I do, I might even take a 6 number just to confirm that I'm actually down into the 70s. Let's see here, 79. Yep, I'm going to use one more test strip and see what I learned from that. One more data point. Because a bunch of data points together give a better picture than a single data point alone. Nope, that says 80. Okay, so now let me look at them all together by touching on the logbook. Okay. So all together, there's 6 of them now. 80, 79, 78, 83, 84, 87. I am going to say 79. Yeah, because I have a 78, 79, and 80. I'm going to say 79. And then I am going to do the math, dividing the glucose in milligrams, so 79 glucose in milligrams per deciliter divided by ketones, 1.5 millimoles equals 52.6. That's beautiful. That means a ratio of 53. And I am putting up the Dr. Boz chart so that you can see that and see in the middle column her ratios compared to the right column, which is the GKI, glucose ketone index. That's the scientific way that it's measured. But Dr. Boz simplifies it so that she gives us targets of stay below 200 if you want to know you don't have high insulin. If you want to have guaranteed weight loss, get down to 80, a ratio of 80, a ratio of your glucose to ketones as 80. And then if you want to clean up your immune system, strengthen it, go down to 40. And if you're a cancer patient, you might want to consider getting down to 20. And so that's her chart. And on the left-hand column, you can kind of see the meaning of those levels of descent down in insulin ratio or glucose to ketone index. It is 7:30 at night on my third day of the Sardines and Greens, and I just realized that I'm not hungry, but I need to decide whether I'm going to eat and go to bed without anything, or if I'm going to eat even though I'm not hungry. So maybe the best thing to do would be to test. So I'm going to point the camera down and test and see what's going on with my glucose and my ketones and my insulin ratio while I think about whether I want to go ahead and eat or not. Because let me show you what would be my last meal. I have, as an option, I have 2 more cans of sardines left from my dozen cans. And I have a can of lightly smoked mussels and a can of mackerel in olive oil, which I would drain off the oil and rinse these. So these could be my protein if I decide to eat another meal. And I would also have some capers with them just to make them more palatable to me. And the other thing, of course, would be to make a greens drink. And then I would decide, how do I want to make that drink? How do I want it to taste? So anyway, I'm going to test now and see what my circulating energy tells me. So I will open my kit and get out a ketone strip. I also need to open my phone here. Let's see. Okay. To the Dario. Okay, ketone strip into the end of the BioCoach and the meter from my Dario kit into the end of the phone. Take off the end cap for the testing strips. Pull out 5. Okay. Close that, put the cap back on, and do the finger stick. Oh, if that feels a little tender there, let's do this one. On the side, pull up a bead of blood, touch it to the end of the pipette end of the test strip, and let's see what this okay, that says 1.3 and that says 97. So if I were just going by glucose alone, if all my numbers come around 97, I would think that I would need to eat, but we'll also calculate my insulin ratio. And that's 94. And this one is this one says 91. And this one, so they're all coming in close in numbers. 98. And I will look at all 5 together and decide which one seems the most likely to me. 95. Okay, so 1.3 and what? Look at the logbook. 95, 98, 91, 94, 97. So 98 is the highest, 91's the lowest. Let's say 95. Let's put the meter back in the Dario kit. So 95 and 1.3. Let's do the math. Calculator. 95 glucose divided by 1.3 is 73.07. So I'm still below the Dr. Boz ratio of 80, which is in weight loss. I'm comfortable. Let me talk that over here in a minute. So, not hungry. 7:30, 7:44 at night. And my insulin ratio is good, below 80. So what I think I'll do is just at 8:30, go ahead and go to bed. And if I feel hungry during the night, if I'm hungry enough, I can get up and I can eat a can of sardines in the middle of the night. So I'm running that Dr. Bob's ratio chart alongside here on the screen. And you can see what those ratios are, for her ratios in comparison to the glucose ketone index, the GKI, and what it says on the far left-hand column about what is likely happening in the body metabolically at those ratios. Though no one knows for certain when autophagy really starts. They have I don't think it's scientifically been proven yet, but they have assumptions. And I'm just not feeling like eating another dose of sardines and making the noise of the blender for a drink and disturbing the peace of the house right now. I think I'll go back to my tread desk and do some more walking because that feels good to me. Drink some tea and go to bed at 8:30. And yeah, I'm kind of done with the whole sardines thing. But tomorrow I will finish up this video and the summary of it all and add anything if I think needs to be added. And yeah, I think that's it. I think I'll just call it good. I'm kind of done with the whole sardines, even if it was sardines and greens. And I'm looking forward to eating the way I normally would eat, not doing these experimental 3-day fasts or a 5-day mimicking fast, which is a whole nother topic. And I don't think I will do a video on that, but who knows what burr I'll get under my saddle. You never know. It's now the morning after my 3-day experiment with sardines and greens to see what it would do to my blood glucose and my blood ketones. I'm hungry, so I am going to test. All right, pull out the ketone testing strip and put that in the BioCoach and get out the Lego-like piece that's the diarrheometer and get 5 test strips and put that in and do a finger stick on the side and drop a bead of blood. Touch the bead of blood to the end of the test strip, the pipette end, and see what the numbers reveal. Okay, 1.7 in ketones. And I did not eat last night. 85 in glucose for the first of the 5 numbers. Let's see what the other numbers might be. That says 83. Okay, that's nice. It's only 2 digits apart. Let's see if this third one will stay within that same range, and then I'll just stop testing. 88. So 85, well, it went a little higher than the 85. It's still 3 digits, but I've got plenty of test strips. I can blow through them. Keep pulling up beads of blood. 81. Okay, and so one more, and then I will compare all 5 numbers to see what they tell me. 82. Okay. So now I'm going to open up the logbook and put the cap back on the Dariometer kit. And let's do a screenshot of these and show you the numbers for this morning. Okay. So I had an 85, an 83, an 88, an 81, and an 82. I'm going to kick out the 88 and the 85 and go look at the 81, 82, and 83. I'd say an 82. So now let's do the math and figure out the insulin ratio by using the 82 glucose milligrams per deciliter divided by the ketones, 1.7 millimoles per liter, equals an insulin ratio of 48. And I'm putting up on the screen the chart that shows Dr. Boz's insulin ratio in the middle column and the equivalent GKI, glucose ketone index, on the right column. And then on the far left, you can see what where this 48 insulin ratio lies in that ranking and what could be going on metabolically. It's closer to the immune stimulating cleaning up of the cells than it is guaranteed weight loss. So, I mean, it's below the 80 that is the weight loss number. And again, for reference, since it's not on the chart, anything 200 and above indicates high insulin, according to Dr. Annette Bosworth in that 14-minute video that I've linked in the description box. If you click on that video, her 14-minute explanation of how she went from the GKI calculation to her insulin ratio calculation, which is easier to do mathematically for those in the US whose glucose meters automatically read in milligrams per deciliter. She says that if you have a waking fasting glucose of 100 or above, that's high insulin. But then later on in the 14-minute video, she talks about 200 as a ratio being above high insulin. So obviously if you're high insulin for waking fasting glucose of 100 milligrams per deciliter in the morning, then of course if you're up to 200 as an insulin ratio, then you have high insulin according to her calculations. After 3 days of sardines and greens, I want one of my favorite meals, and that is a yogurt bowl. So I have some yogurt in a bowl, and I'm going to top that with some freshly ground flaxseed. So let me get that out and do that. I buy golden flax from the bulk section at Sprouts, or if I have to order it online, sometimes I do that. And I keep a little coffee scoop that's a 2 tablespoon measure in here. I grind it in this little coffee grinder that has my removable chamber is drying over here. It has a removable chamber, so I really like this version of the coffee grinder because after I grind the flax in here, I can wash this out and let it dry and then put it back in, and so it's not a one-piece deal that it's hard to grind different things. And this gives it the flexibility, the removable chamber. That will be linked in the description box. So I am putting in a quarter of a cup of flaxseed. Okay, that's all I need to do to grind it. And now I'm going to put that over my yogurt. And interestingly enough, flaxseed is also rich with omega-3 oils. Steve asked me, he said, why do you eat that stuff? I said, for the fiber and for the omega-3s. There's other things. I'll put up an image on the screen for what flaxseed is good for. And I'll have a link in the description box for those who are worried about flax maybe being a problem with estrogen. It's not. Okay, I'm also going to do a 1/4 cup of chia seeds, and I'll put that around the edge. I'm just feeling like I want all this fiber in me. So there's my chia seeds in the bowl. See, kind of around the edge. And I will go put these things back in the pantry. All I had to do was give this thing a quick rinse, and now it's clean, and I'm putting it back over here by the coffee machine on a dish towel to drain. And I am feeling a very intense desire for fruit, and that's actually where the yogurt bowl comes from. The yogurt is giving me lots of protein because I'm using a large amount of yogurt, plus I stirred in a scoop of collagen into it. But boy, am I hungry for fruit. So I'm going to be having some fruit with this yogurt bowl of mine. My meal is ready, and boy, am I ready for my meal. I'm going to start with the cucumbers, and then I'll move on to the yogurt bowl. These two side-by-side charts show the difference in my glucose from before I started the yogurt bowl until a little over 2 hours after I finished the yogurt bowl. And I'd say that was pretty good on my blood sugar. And that is the end of my 3-day Sardines and Greens experiment on myself.